Hi everyone, I hope you're good guy. Welcome to a new video. Today part one of my fast dub techno template explanation. Basically this template I've been creating live during my live stream on my other Audioreakt YouTube channel. I will put the link in the description. It's every 2 Sunday I create a track from scratch and you can come around, ask some questions. And yeah, this time we've been for some dub techno a little bit faster than usual, 140 BPM around that. And today we're gonna have a look into each track, the sound design, the MIDIs and the why each track. And then next week we will focus more on the arrangement, automation, variation, mixing and master. Alright, so let's jump into Ableton and have a listen to the track. And you have another part with a pad. Alright, so let's get started with the kick drum. Basically for this track, I wanted like a pretty long kick with a long tail. Like this. Basically this kick is from my Htas bar sample pack. It's a free sample pack, put the link in the description. So then I had my kick drum track, which sound like this. You can hear it enhance the click, it add a bit of reverb. It's a raw rack I created especially for that to add a bit of top hand to your kick, help it cut through the mix, help it to make it a bit less dry. Then I add a bit of EQ. Kind of boost the low. Kind of making the kick a little bit more tight, and then the limiter, it actually doesn't, just a little bit work. Then for the hats, usually in dub techno it's pretty minimalist for the hat. You have like just 1-2 hats. This time I've been a little bit more generous, so you have 2 types of hats. You have the first one, which is in this track, which are basically again hats from my Htas bar sample pack. You have a close eye hat and open hats that work together, a pattern like this. So kind of a 16 close eye hat pattern and open hat playing offbeat. Pretty simple, straightforward. And then they don't really have that much process. Bit of reverb to make them a bit less dry. And then I use drum bass a lot, so you're gonna see this is something I like to use on the hats. I usually add a bit of dry, 20-30% in soft mode for the hats. And then I usually compress and control the input with the trim, so it's depending on how loud I want my sound and how much squeeze it kind of I want it. And then crunch really is gonna add a bit of grit and add a bit of loudness. Dump will reduce the very higher frequency, so it kind of soften the sound, because crunch can add some extra harmonies that can be a bit annoying or too noisy, and dump will help with that. And transient, I kind of use it negatively, so I use it kind of as a gate. It reduces the tail of the reverb and making the sound a bit sharper. So this is really depend. I don't use all the time. Sometimes if I like the hats to be a bit more noisy, I will remove the drum bass. But when I want them to be a bit more modern and sharp, I will then use the drum bass for that. Then during the track, they play pretty much all the time the same pattern. The open hat is always offbeat. The close eye hat is always a 16 close eye hat. But you can see I play with the velocity, and the 2 first notes are lower than the 2 other, which give this nice kind of groove. And then after, when I introduce both in the same time, basically this note, it was the one from the close eye hat who was there, and I just put it to play as open hat and give this nice groove. Then you have some 909 hats, so you can see open hat offbeat, and the right it's kind of 2 times offbeat, and then you have on the beat and just before the beat here, and then just after the beat here, so which work well with the groove. So yeah, in terms of process, no individual process for the open hat or the right. You can see they're as high as it is. I just add a bit of reverb, EQ and drum bass here again. So you will have obviously a bit of reverb to give a bit of room to your hats to make them less dry. EQing, where I will get rid of all of this lower frequency that I don't really need, and I will boost where there is the open hat here, where there is the number 3, and the right the number 2, and cut off the very high with the number 4 here. Boost the right. push the open hat, reduce the loudness of the noise. So we get something a bit more surgical. And then I have a drum bus that again does exactly the same job than the previous. Usually the hats, when you add some reverb, and then I use drum bus, I use the compressor, so it's kind of gluing a little bit, and you have the crunch and the drive who had extra harmonics, and then you have the transient who reduce the tail of the reverb, so it's kind of a way to modernize a little bit your hats. That's something I like to do. Make them a bit sharper and tighter and kind of more modern, at the opposite of more like kind of a noisy analogy sound of hat. Then we have some shaker. This one, it was to add some kind of extra groove at one point in the track. You know, when you kind of reach the climax and you want to add this extra drum to kind of give even more driving effect. That's what I will use with the shaker. So you can see the pattern. It's like this crescendo velocities going on. So with the stronger one off beat and the lowest one on the beat. So it's giving this movement. And then here what I have got again, it's a shaker from the Htas bar sample pack, so you can grab it as well. And here I like to use the attack at 30 milliseconds. Usually when you have the attack at 30 milliseconds, it creates this very short aspiration. It's like this very short fade, which kind of create kind of a shaker effect. I couldn't explain why, but it does that to the sound. You have as well velocity, which kind of add a bit of organic feeling, a bit more human feeling by randomizing. And then some effect, obviously. Delay is gonna add some movement. You see, obviously, it's like with more rhythmical now. It's a ping pong delay with two separate times, so you get this left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right movement on your ears with around 30% dry wet. A bit of reverb, make it less dry, as usual. Drum bus, exactly same reason than before. Make it louder, more modern, let's say. Then this is the same delay than before, but that I will use as a Htas effect. Make you sound a bit more stereo. And then you have some sidechain, obviously it's just classic bumping effect. And then you have EQ8. Here again, it's trying to boost like frequency that really make the shaker shine and kind of getting rid of the one who are unnecessary. Obviously, this is case by case. I don't really have any tips. Just have to take a bell EQ and sweep until you find a frequency that you feel like, okay, this is really enhancing the sound. And yeah, that's pretty much it for our drums. Pretty simple, straightforward. All right, so now let's go into the bass. So you remember the kick was quite with a long tail kick. So for the bass line, we will have some missing, not too subby, obviously. I try to give groove with the length of the note. This depends as well of your chord pattern. It's have to all work together. The sound itself is gonna be, you can hear pretty basic. Usually it's just some pretty sine wave bass line, or here I use a triangle, but because I filter it, obviously could almost use a sine wave. And there is nothing much. Just no release, so like this. The thing is, because I didn't put release here when my note is stopping here, the sound is stopping here. Because if you have a longer release, obviously the sound is gonna fade out like this a bit longer. So you don't have the same rhythmical effect. And then yeah, it's just like square waveform, so two's going through 24 dB low pass filter with a bit of drive resonance. I have the sub oscillator as well. And then I will add a bit of delay. So delay on bass might sound weird to you. It is a little bit, it can create some phase problem. So you always have to check your mono compatibility, but it's always a great way to add movement, to add a bit more stereo as well, depending on how you set your delay. Here in ping pong, it will add a bit of stereo. So your bassline can feel kind of more stereo and more full. Sidechain compression. And then I just look at everything just to get really the low. So you can see here my bassline is not that low subby that it could be. You know, sometimes, for example, I could have something like this. I could have put the sub an octave down to have a more subby But because again the kick is playing with a very long tail, I feel it kind of get messy. Rather than here it stay like kind of nice and groovy. And then I have this utility. So here's where I put everything under 120 Hz in mono. So like this, I don't have any like... You can see that the delay doesn't cause that much problem. So now we have our synth part. So here the idea, obviously for dub techno, is to have some chords playing into a lot of delay and reverb. That's the main global idea. But here you have two categories. You will have like some chords which are more like rhythmical, but secondary kind of chord that I will put more like in the background a little bit, just to kind of use it as a backbone. And then I will have like some chords which I will put a little bit more in the front, like if they were a hook. And usually this one are a bit more interesting than the rhythmical one, and all of these kind of create a contrast, obviously. So that's what we're gonna see over. So you will have this chord 1 and chord 2. And then you will have this main chord, which are... So there is this one, and there is this one as well, the number 3. Which are usually a bit more brighter, got a bit more character, and they are just popping here and there less often. And then finally, I add a pad. This is like to kind of add variation during the track, to take a break from the chord kind of feeling things. So at one point, I will kind of get rid of this chord or put them more in background and have the pad playing. The pad is not like just a kind of a background texture things. It's way much more like a lead element where you have some nice variation, flanger, phaser effect, but we'll come back to it later. So the first chord, dub techno chord, you know, it's always about delay, dub delay, and reverb, and adding character to that. It's always kind of a tricky one to get something interesting, but there is some cool tips here that you can learn. So the pattern, this is something I record with the push live during the live stream. You know, I like to use the 16 repeat note on the push. You can do that with the arpeggiator as well. Let me look here. And I'm gonna remove the return as well. Oops. And then we have a chord device which is gonna create a F minor. You can see here you have +3 submeter and +7, and then it goes into wavetable. And here you can see I use the basic shape. Basically this is a triangle, but you can see I use a bit of warp and fold. You can see how the warp kind of make the sound a little bit more hollow, and the fold I use it just as modulation after as well to add variation, but I put it around 23. You can see how it's gonna alter the sound without really changing it. It's great to obviously add modulation and variation without changing too much the tone of your sound. So then everything is gonna go obviously through a low pass filter, which is modulated by an envelope, here envelope 2, and as usual you have like a very sharp envelope, so usually almost no sustain, and attack at 0, so very fast, so no attack, and then a decay around 600 milliseconds, so like this your filter is opening sharp and you get this plucky and percussive stab sound. And then you have LFO1, which is modulating oscillator 1 position. So basically your oscillator 1 position is gonna go from square, going through sawtooth, and then going to triangle. So basically doing like this, up and then down, and then up and then down. And this is gonna slightly change the tone of your sound. Obviously it's not gonna change it too much, but it's just this little variation which is gonna make it less boring, and you're gonna get tired less quickly than usual. So then after, when you have your chord, obviously kind of a basic sound, and it's all about the effect as well. So you have different way to get this dub. Mainly it's like a dub delay obviously and a reverb, but you can as well play with some filters or EQ, resonance, some drive, distortion to kind of get more gritty and kind of more old school feeling as well as kind of dub techno chord. So here I have, you see, some EQ and some drive. I'm gonna put the delay and the reverb first because it's better to hear how this EQ and the distortion works. So we have a filter delay. The great thing with filter delay is that you have 3 kind of delay. You have left plus right, left and right. So I like to use the left plus right more like in the mid-range. So it's kind of a, let's say, classic delay, if we can say so. And then I will use the left and the right to filter them more specifically. So you can see this one is more filtering in the low mid and this one more in the high. And that's what kind of gives this nice dubby effect. And obviously all of them have a different time, so this you can experiment as well. It depends of your MIDI pattern as well. It's all about finding the right groove. All have 30% feedback, and yeah, already you get this dubby effect. And then I had this reverb, which sounds a bit kind of weird because I use the convolution reverb. You can use as well spring reverb, it will work well. Here I use convolution, and I use as well a bit of the algorithmic shimmer reverb. So this is the convolution alone. This is just the shimmer reverb. And I use a mix of both. So you get this weird reverb. I EQ it a little bit just to boost the high here. Alright, so let's go back to our filtered and drive effect. So for me, this is really what's gonna give character to your chords, kind of what's gonna make it from a bit like a classic boring chords to a bit more interesting. I use this EQ, actually it's a preset from Ableton, which is called Vocal E, which is actually supposed to make you sound like E, I guess. But what I like is kind of create a little bit of this, radio effect where it's like very filtered. And you can see here because obviously the low and the high are very much cut and you have some good resonance on certain frequency here. And I just like the tone it gives to the sound. Then add a bit of overdrive. It's pretty subtle. It helps as well to filter a little bit the sound. And then here I use erosion, so each erosion you can add a bit of noise and grittiness with, and that's exactly what I did. And with this sound, it's kind of by adding noise, adding a bit of grit as well, you're gonna hear. And yeah, and then it's just some sidechain compression to the kick. And I have another sidechain compression to the main chord, so like this when the main chord is playing. This one is duck a little bit to leave space to the main chord. I will come back to this next week when I talk about mixing. And then the auto filter is just to add variation because the thing is, because of this filter and modulated, I didn't really want it to touch it anymore because I like the movement of it. And if I change the frequency, it would kind of alter the sound in the way I didn't really like it. You could play like this with the filter and add a bit more even variation, but I like it to keep it simple for this one. As I say, it's like kind of a background secondary synth. And I will use here this auto filter as a low pass filter, 24 dB. It's a MS-20 type filter. With a lot of drive, it's gonna add a lot of loudness. And yeah, that's how so this is our first background kind of chord, and then after we have this chord 2 here. Again, it's just one single note F playing, but because of the chord device, it's kind of playing a F minor. And here again, pretty simple patch. Here you have kind of a triangle sawtooth waveform from the OB6 shape from the vintage collection. And then again, you have a low pass filter that you're gonna modulate with an envelope. And here I had a bit of resonance, so you get this nice sweeping effect. The envelope amp is modulating the filter, so you got something like that. This is pretty basic patch. It was just kind of having this note playing offbeat a little bit. This is kind of a basic sound, but it was just like to add a bit of movement and a bit of kind of hypnotic effect to the track. So again, the ping pong delay and kind of a dub delay. Obviously, to get this dub delay, you need to have your delay filtered. Here, I use as well the input drive of the echo device to really like kind of add a bit more grit. Here, the right is slightly delay from the left, mainly to add a bit more stereo to your delay. Here, when you go to modulation, you can have a LFO modulating the filter, so that's what it does at the rate of 8. You can see it's kind of a ramp down LFO. slightly modulating the filter, so it's gonna slightly make this move. I used a little bit of the reverb, which is inside Ableton Echo, and then 50% dry wet, and then a bit of reverb. It's kind of quite metallic reverb. And then the idea is just really to low pass everything. You're gonna hear how it works in the track. If I remove it, this is typically the kind of element that you will, when you listen to the track, you will forget that it's here and you will barely pay it attention, but it's the element that if you remove it, you straight away notice that there is something wrong and off. So that was our two first chord, which our like kind of a background chord, I would say. Now we're gonna talk about more like our main chord, and you have this one here. Okay, again, F note, and you will have a chord device on your chain. So here you can see some similarity with the first chord patch that I show you. I like to sometimes recycle synth, and I would just like duplicate the track and reuse this kind of the same synth setting and use it as a new starting point. Obviously you can see it's a different sound than the chord one, you can see it's different filter, but you can see you have the same waveform with the warp and a bit of fold. Obviously this time I had a second oscillator, and I detune it 7 semitones, so it gets this nice effect, which is very kind of dubby classic style. If I don't, it sounds great like this as well, but if I detune, and then it's going through a bandpass filter. So again, bandpass filters are great because they filter your signal heavily, and so it's very great after when you put into a lot of delay and reverb. It got really nice character. So here I use the 24 dB clean, and you can see here it's modulating by an envelope as well. So if you go to matrix, you can see it 48% by the envelope, too, very sharp. And yeah, so here I have my bandpass that is set to a certain position that I'm not really able to modulate it, because if I modulate it because of the envelope and the movement, kind of create weird sound that I don't really want. I want to kind of keep the same sound as bass, but then you can still use the second filter of wavetable to have like a kind of a classic low pass filter, and like to kind of close it sometimes, open it sometimes to add this variation. Here I do this movement by using a LFO, which is modulating the frequency flicker 2 here, you can see, and it's slow rate 6 bar, and it's sine wave going 50%. Very small amount and small variation, but that's just what is enough to add variation. You can hear how like, now the filter is getting super close, and then open, close, even closer. So yeah, one thing as well worth noting is that this chord is playing every bar for 4 bar and then doesn't play for another 4 bar and then start again. So it's like kind of a 8 bar loop pattern, but you can see that the rate is a 6 bar length rate. So obviously you will have some kind of polymeter in terms of variation, because your pattern and your LFO rate will not resync all the time in the same time. It will take a couple of cycling to be resync in the same time. So that's great because it's add a bit more variation. All right, then it goes into some dub delay again. I think it's the same precedent before, with again some drive input, filter delayed. Here I didn't modulate the filter with the LFO, but yeah, ping pong delay, this is this after is like kind of same kind of setting than I explained before, so I'm not gonna go over again. And then a bit of EQ. Again, EQ getting rid of frequency I don't really need, boosting the one I feel that need to put or can put the sound into the front. And then drum bass here, again, same purpose than for the Htas. It's like just putting the sound in your face, modernize a little bit the sound, a bit of drive and crunch. It's gonna have some extra harmonics. Transient's gonna be negative and it's gonna kind of create this gate effect, so it's gonna reduce the tail of the reverb. I does that because like this you have a reverb which can be like with a long tail and in a big space, but by using this gate effect it reduces the tail of the reverb, so you still have the feeling of a very wide reverb but without having the long tail, which can like get your mix messy. Then our chord 3, again F minor, So this is the sound without the effect. You can see it's just like a sawtooth with a sine wave playing at the same octave, or again going through a low pass filter and then that you open with an envelope. So if I go to matrix, it's open with the amp envelope. So pretty sharp sound, no sustain, pretty basic sound, but again, process gonna make the difference. Here the sidechain is the early, I don't remember why, but again, erosion is gonna add a bit of grit, get the nice dirty effect. EQ, it's gonna filter. This is great to add character. Again, you can hear already how it adds character. If you use a filter, it doesn't really matter if it's a high pass, low pass, band pass. Just use a filter with some resonance and it will add character. Depend obviously what type of sound you want. So you might use different filter for it. And especially when you add delay and reverb, this is crazy after. This is just like to make the sound from the left to right. I will come back to it next week on the more like arrangement video. So once time is hitting on the right, after it's gonna hit on the left and then more in the middle and then slightly on the left, slightly on the right, etc. So then we have some delay, obviously that's gonna add a bit of movement. You can see here the feedback is pretty short, so it was just to kind of give this little movement. You're gonna see later there is more delay and reverb, so that's gonna make it things a bit longer, but for now it's just had this little movement. Then I have another echo. Here you have the reverb as well, the delay is filtered. So you might think it's a lot of delay and reverb. It's all about trying to find the nice character, the nice groove, the nice texture out of your simple basic chords. So that's why there is that many. And a bit of reverb. And then I got another filter delay, which I think is longer. And then drum bass. Exactly the same, put things in your front, add a bit of loudness, reduce the tail of the reverb, compress. And then here the same, the low pass filter is gonna help make some transition and or more kind of use as the low pass filter. Again, it's because I rather keep this one with the modulation as the same position, so like this it doesn't alter the sound too much. If I just need this low pass filter movement, I can just use the auto filter with a low pass filter. So here it's like kind of imitating a Moog Prodigy, and it's just gonna close a little bit the filter just to add a bit of variation, sometimes muffle the sound, sometimes open it more, and yeah. Alright, and all together it works like this. Alright, now we have our pad here. So this was something I wanted to add to kind of break the monotony or like the continuousness of the chords always playing the whole track. But this pad was not like just kind of a texture surf that you will put on the background to kind of support the track. I want it to be more like a main element. So it sounds like this. You're gonna see it's a very flangery pad. Again, a lot of delay filtered sound. So the pattern is kind of not like a steady long note that you would expect. It's more like kind of a rhythmical pattern, but because it's deep into a lot of delay and reverb, it kind of creates this continuous sound. Might sound familiar, the preset. I think it's the same preset than one of the chords, so I'm not gonna go over. Anyway, here it's not really like about the same preset, it's more like about how you're gonna get a nice character out of your basic sound, because the chord you don't have that many possibility kind of to create, but then it's all about how you're gonna process it in order to give character. And a great way to do that is, that I haven't shown you yet, is to use cabinet. So again, cabinet is like kind of gonna create a kind of a filtered muffled sound a little bit. It's really great when you want some weird sound. Cabinet it's really great. And then I will have some flanger. And then you have another one, phaser. You see they have different speeds. Again, like how you set your phaser flanger, this is like, usually if you want something slow movement, obviously like this, like slightly changing, you want something of a slow rate. So something around 6, 8 bar, and you see here I've done the opposite, 8 and 6 bar. A very slow movement. Then after it depends the time, how much you want the effect. Same with the notch, center, spread, blend. Depending on how you want to accentuate the effect, you can experiment this. Then you have to filter everything. And filter again, so filter resonance, like I said before. And then when you bring this into a lot of delay and reverb, this is where the magic happens. See if I remove the filter. So pretty long feedback here. The filter is modulated as well by a LFO. So kind of the same preset I think than the one I used previously, where it's again a very slow rate, bit of reverb. Autopan is gonna make it go from the left to the right. Some sidechain to have a bit of groove. More delay. Auto filter here, it's more like to kind of introduce the sound or remove it. I don't remember playing that much with, because anyway the pad is just playing like in this part of the track. We will see that next week anyway. And then the flanger that I will use just rarely during the track. So you can see here it doesn't play. And then you will hear this flangy effect coming, which is a bit more pronounced. Here. Just playing it here and there to add a bit of variation. I don't want to be too long, because flanger effect I like, but when it's used a little bit, not too much. And that's how we get our pads. Now we're gonna talk about sound which are more like kind of texture or ambience. We have this first, which is I call organic, but it's kind of a bleepy, like kind of a watery sound. Basically, this came from this sample, which is from 99 Sound. That's the original sound. So you can see here the loop, it's kind of playing a bit too often, and I want it more to play like a single shot here and there. So what I've done is I've chopped some clips, some parts where it's playing a little bit less often. You know, there is some parts where it's not playing at all. And the reason being that then after here what I'm doing with all the clip, I use the follow action from Ableton. So it's always playing another clip, and it's kind of like this randomized when it's playing. Sometimes it's gonna play, sometimes no, sometimes it's play 2 times in the row, sometimes no. And yeah, then after this, I just record it, and it's recorded like a kind of a random pattern along the track. And then it's about adding a lot of effect to make it more interesting. So obviously a bit of delay and reverb, which straight away makes things cool. Autopan to make it move around your head. So you see, sometimes it's not playing. And then it play a bit more longer. A bit more reverb. So you see, I don't want it something too often, and something pretty and I wanted something pretty random. A bit of filter. Drum bass, same rhythm than before, makes things louder, tighten the reverb of the tail of the reverb. And some final EQ. And this is something pretty subtle but pretty nice, I like during the track. This I like because this is the kind of element that you might not hear it at the first listen, but then 1 year after you've been listening to the track, you re-listen to it and you are like, oh, I didn't hear this little blip blop in the background. And then we have some noise. So you have 2 noise which are not really ambience, they are more like kind of a rhythmical noise. You have this one we play from the beginning. It's made with one of my right called noise rhythm, basically using a noise and using LFO to kind of make it modulate and more rhythmical, like kind of a gate effect, psytrance gate effect, but with noise. So I put the link in the description if you want to find out more about this rack. And yeah, it's great because you add a bit of texture at the beginning of the track as well. During the rest of the track, you don't hear it that much because obviously you have all of the other elements. But yeah, here basically you have rhythm 1 and rhythm 2. There are 2 independent LFO that gonna make you sound very differently. But you see you have different variation. that you can use. And then you have an auto pan to make it go from the left to the right. This during the track I remove it and I let it a bit more center, but I will talk about this during the automation part next week. And then we have noise too, which is kind of a noise I like to use more like as a rhythmical ride effect. You see this nice crackling noise. I use actually a sample from Rain and to Umbrella. I like because this kind of crackle pop is remind me a little bit like a kind of vinyl style effect, but then I use that and I process it in the way that I can use as a texture, and here in that case as a more groovier texture. So again, hurried band pass, give character, autopan will add a bit of movement, more EQ, delay. Here you can see I use the input drive to kind of crank up the volume. And then again it's some filter delay, and here the filter is modulated by the LFO again a bit more this time, a bit of reverb, and yeah, here again slightly delayed shift to have a bit more swing. And then heavily filtered again. And then I have this LFO which is gonna create this sweeping effect. This is a great way to kind of add variation to your noise without changing too much. And yeah, that's pretty much it for all of the synth part. Then after you have two tracks which are sub mixdown and mixdown. I'll talk about it next week because it's more kind of a mixing purpose related. And then you have this tree return that I will talk about in next week as well because it's more about the arrangement, just to help with the transition. So I'll talk about this next week, and the master as well, chain, that I will talk about it next week. So alright, and that's it for today's guy. I hope you like this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you like the template. You can grab it, the link in the description. It's a great way to support me. And see you next week for part 2, guys. Bye bye.